Hello YouTube, welcome back to Kind Heart Homestead. My name is Ben and I'm up here in our off-grid property in the mountains of Virginia. I'm here in our 80-foot by 80-foot garden fence and we're about to assess what's under this tarp and maybe get some seeds planted. So here's a quick time lapse of the tarp getting rolled back and then we're going to get to work. We got the tarp pulled back a few feet. We don't want to pull back the whole thing because the weeds are going to grow before we have a chance to plant. We actually don't have too much experience in this climate zone yet planting things. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. But for now, I'm going to connect one tight string line so I can designate our first 50-foot bed.
We have a video that explains what preparations we made during the winter and the spring to prepare for our summer crops. So I'm not going to go into much detail about the hay that you see here and the tarp. What I will mention is I went ahead and ran a string line 53 feet. That way the stake will be beyond the 50-foot bed on each end. And that way if we have to mow or weed whack or anything, we'll have some of the bed area to spare. That way if the grass decides to grow over the bed, it shouldn't encroach upon the crops too much. I have this piece of metal piping that you see on the ground horizontally. That's going to span these two T-posts and act as a tie-off point for our tomato plants. We like to use the string method with tomato clips to make sure that they grow tall rather than on the ground. That way the tomatoes are easier to pick and they're elevated off the ground for inspection. It's a lot easier to find pests that way, and we don't get all the bruising that you might get if tomatoes were laying on the ground. So that's the first few plants on this 50-foot bed, but as you can see closer to the Hugelkultur bed, Angie planted some peppers. And this dark substance you see around all the crops is actually our fresh homemade compost. We have a flexible compost bin. We like to throw all of our food scraps in there, but also during this season, when I'm mowing the grass almost every day, we can put the grass clippings in there as well. And then once they're broken down enough to this color that you see here, we can finally put it on the plants. Here's the hugel bed that you've probably seen us do in a shorts reel. Go check that out if you haven't seen it already. But we're growing strawberries in there, some elderberry plants, and then we have a fruit tree on each side. We're gradually adding more flowers and more things as we find them to the hugel bed. We're hoping it'll be a great guild for our permaculture garden, which is going to be a bit of a hybrid approach between permaculture principles and row crops. I think since we're in the mindset of row crops and we have that experience, it's going to be a bit easier for us to use that for our food production. But that our permaculture garden, we're going to be using those permaculture principles to grow our fruit tree guilds and have maybe herbs, pollinator gardens, and maybe some ground fruits like berry bushes. But until we do more research and create an actual permaculture design, we're definitely going to keep these 50-foot beds in place. Eventually, if we want to do some like logs and rocks and pathways, we can start encroaching upon those row crops as we see fit. We've been direct seeding the rest of this 50-foot bed as we have time, either when Cedar's at school or maybe during the weekdays after dinner. Regardless, it's a bit of a chore because we haven't tilled this area before. I used the pitchfork to do some broad forking to loosen up the soil under the surface. Sometimes we use the pitchfork to properly space our holes, but you really just need to follow the instructions on the seed packet. We don't have our greenhouse set up, so we couldn't do vegetable starts this year to transplant. Here's a close-up of Angie and Cedar planting some snap peas along the trellis. And I'm using the pitchfork once again to define the spacing of seeds for some radishes and spinach. It looks like the spinach seeds did not sprout, but the radishes did. This bed contained cucumbers, tomatoes, and zucchini squash last year. We're trying to do some crop rotation so we don't grow the same things in the same bed each year.
I haven't been able to participate in the gardening as much as I would like because I'm so busy doing infrastructure and YouTube videos, building things like the chicken coops, our tool rack, and constructing our house, obviously. So Angie's been nice enough to take the reins on the crops. But one project I have been looking forward to was transplanting our volunteer squash from the compost pile to this previously tarped area between our solar shed and our solar panels. This is a south-facing area, and it should get plenty of sun. As you can see here, the squash plants need to be thinned. Angie ended up doing that after this video. But I'm mulching the area with fresh-cut grass. My understanding is as long as I don't put that grass right on the plant, it should act as a good mulch and help prevent the weeds from taking over. But this is a pretty weed-free area because we did have a tarp there. That's where our solar panels used to be before I put them on the custom rack mount. So it took a couple more mows to get enough grass to mulch the entire area, but now the whole rectangle looks green and these plants are doing very good. I just have to make sure I go out and water them each morning before they really get dried up by the afternoon sun. And we're using our rain barrel for irrigation. So like I said, Angie's been taking the reins on this garden. I've just been going in and helping prep the beds, and then she fills them up with plants. So in the first couple rows, I know there's things like tomatoes, cucumbers, okra, and carrots. I don't know what's going to be in this next row, but I know that she wants the flexibility to expand our garden. So I'm going to keep rolling the tarp back every time she fills up a row. And I'm using my 6-foot level here, just kind of as a ruler, to measure 5 feet. So I'm kind of subtracting a foot off of the end. But basically between the string lines is 5 feet. And a string line represents the approximate center of each 50-foot bed. So I guess you could say 5 feet on center. We're not actually measuring a width of the bed, we're just putting a string line down the middle. I know it's kind of a lazy and informal approach, but maybe in the future, once we kind of perfect our design and get all of our infrastructure set up, we will have 2 stakes on each end. That way, every time we go to plant or compost or mulch, we can put up 2 string lines, one on each side of the bed, and that'll mark the walkways, and it'll allow us to know exactly where the compost should be added and where the seeds should go. So all I'm really doing here is raking the hay out of the center of each bed and moving it to the walkways. But there's some parts that have no hay at all, so I'm carrying the thick spots to the thin spots. At this point, I realized it would be quicker to just take our wobbler irrigation system out of storage than it would be to try to water these 3 50-foot rows manually, especially since the hose tends to get into the crop area and I don't want to disturb Angie's seedlings. I simply attach each wobbler riser to a U-post using a zip tie. So you can see here, I just hooked it up to our standard hose because I don't have our irrigation controller and manifold hooked up yet. But that shouldn't take too long to do once we're ready for it. But for now, we'll just have to hook up the hose, start a timer on our phones to remind us to go out and manually turn off the water. But I just let this water run for about 20 minutes now to let the soil get saturated. And as you can see, the water actually reaches the hugel bed and a couple of our fruit trees as well. But the beauty of this system is that we can simply move the risers. Well, that concludes this video simply because I need to get this uploaded for our weekly publication. But the garden's not done, homesteading's never done, and that's the beauty of it. We can always improve, always build. Let us know down in the comments what you're planting this year and what kind of garden infrastructure you've been preparing. And we look forward to seeing you back here next time on Kind Heart Homestead.